Figured it out. You ready? You ready? Holy crap! What a crazy thing. There is one tiny thing left for me to do, and that's just click this. Ladies and gentlemen, I really do apologize for the delay in this tonight. This was everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I usually use Restream.io to actually do my interviews here, and that didn't work, which has happened before. StreamYard did not work, which has never happened before. And so I had to teach myself how to stream on Zoom, which is what exactly I've done. The problem now is I can't see comments or anything like that now because I'm doing this on Zoom. So this is going to be kind of like in the dark and raw, but it is what we got. So my guest tonight is what it is. My guest tonight is the amazing Sholley Powell. Sholley is a poet, writer, kick-ass, extraordinary human being, right? And she always gets a little shy when I say that, but it's the truth. She is an amazing human being. So, Sholley, how you doing tonight?
I'm well. I'm well. How are you?
Better. Now that I figured that I learned something new. I learned something brand new tonight. It's like, how do you stream on Twitch with Zoom? You can. You probably don't want to, but you can. You can. But no, it's been kind of cool. I've turned my since we last talked, I've turned my podcast into this. I don't know if you've watched any of the episodes I've done. Uh, you know, I've done quite a few episodes with on just different people. Like I've interviewed some pretty famous people actually in the last little bit, which is kind of cool. So it's been kind of an interesting thing as my horizons have grown. Um, this is my niche. I figured this out. Like this is my niche. I wish I had figured this out 6 months ago. That's what I've since we last chatted. Like this, because I've kept doing this the whole time. And one of the things about this is you kind of you take for granted what you always do. And I've been basically teaching myself how not to do that. So how about you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, what have I been up to since we last spoke? Well, I'm like everybody, pretty much everybody in Alberta. I'm at my makeshift home office, aka dining room slash living room. Uh, that is my new 9 to 5, or for me, 7 to 3, 7 to 4. I think that's really the only thing that changed, as well as the ebbs and flows of whatever the guidelines are for COVID. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's everyone still has kind of lost it. I just we're still in the we've lost our minds thing, and we still don't have an equilibrium of what we're supposed to do yet. I'm I'm going to be happy when we're through the lockdown part of this. Some of the changes I think are going to be permanent, but I'm going to be very happy when the lockdown George Orwell thing is done because it's just up from down. I'm not sure. I'm of the conclusion I've lost. I still have no clue what's really going on, and I think everybody's kind of accepted that in some strange way that this is a clueless, mindless time. So I'm just at this point trying to just ride through it.
Yeah, it is definitely a bit of an ebb and flow with kind of with everything new almost every day. Every day is almost like a forget what you know and let's start here. So yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so you like working remote? You enjoying it?
I'm an office girl. I kind of like going into the office. I like keeping my spaces separate. So I know a lot of people really like kind of the advantage of rolling out of bed and online. Um, but yeah, I like keeping certain things separate, which is has been a interesting dynamic even on the fitness side, like not being able to go to the gym and trying to do home workouts. It's just not the same. I I like to keep, you know, this belongs here. This belongs here. So
It's going to be like, it's interesting because on one hand, I think if from the point of view of when I'm employed by somebody in some way or fashion, I actually don't like it in my house because it's a very interesting, it's an interesting boundary situation because now what's happened is now your workplace has access to your home. And again, there are advantages to it. Like I said, we talked about the convenience of it. I don't have to do an hour long commute on the expressway going, my God, or I'm taking the bus or the train or whatever the case may be. And you're like,
yeah,
you're dealing with, you're not dealing with that hassle to and from. But um, but at the same token, there is something about the fact that when you're at home, this is your domain, and it should still be because you're ultimately paying rent for this. And it's a very interesting it's a very interesting ownership concept. I actually think, honestly, if you are a remote worker, that should be like a negotiation tactic for you. Because if you're going to deal with a boss, no, I'm serious about this. If you're going to deal with a boss telling you what to do in your house, you should be paid more money for that. It's like, and
there's just a government supplement for everybody that has to work at home. I think it's something like under $3 a day. And we've been home since November 19th.
yeah. So, some because I know the other thing too, some of these, like, I know probably I'd say like if you're doing like a white collar job like broadcasting, television, radio, that kind of stuff, because I just know this from my own production, it's better to have a studio and a space where everybody's working together on a project. It's just much more cohesive than even working
Right.
on the online thing. Some white collar jobs though, um, you're working on projects that essentially there's you just get your own piece of the project and you're working on it at home, like you could work on it at home, and it's not even like a big deal because um, you're essentially the tools that are required to do the job, most of us have that stuff either on our phone or our home computer. So there is something to be said about the fact that you could probably like you can put people in kind of their remote corners and figure out the fact that these things are that's fine because it's just the function from a functionality standpoint. It's not a big deal. And I also think I love the idea that also the fact that too, like the giant skyscrapers you see being built downtown are practically overnight no longer necessary. That's good and bad. There's going to be some consequences to that in the years to come. I don't think people fully see yet, but I do think that there is some good with that. I think some remote jobs are going to stay remote jobs, and I do think there's some really cool opportunities from a freelancing perspective that haven't really been thought of going forward. So I'm actually kind of looking at that right now is the fact that I can do a remote part-time job as a side hustle, and I can do it, get the job done, and separate myself completely without actually. I There's going to be, I think, a lot more work for hire jobs going forward. So where does your like office job kind of fall into? Like, is it like the broadcasting where it's better with the units together, or is it something where people are better apart, or can
No,
work?
I work in corporate in finance. So it's
So it depends on where. Some financial stuff doesn't really need to be there, like in the actual same building. Some of it does. So, like for
yeah,
you,
there are certain things like in the AR portion of it where we do actually have to physically go into the office to run statements the last day of every month. There are some kind of physicality challenges that we are just kind of working through. So there's always people that actually have to go into the office because there isn't a workaround for it.
no, and that makes like and again, and that's why I'm asking, like, so it's like some office jobs there is no workaround. You have to go into an office to do it. Some there is, and I think what's going to happen is the ones that are, I don't know if they ever go back. So it sounds like in your case, though, in particular, you're going to go back, and you're kind of happy that that's going to be the case with you. It's like, oh, thank God, I get to separate all my spaces again.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair.
Definitely. Just, I mean, I think that when you start, like if your starting point is a home-based business, that's a very different thing. That's a very different avenue. You're already set up um, for that going in. That's the expectation. Um, when you are moved to working at home from a like a corporate atmosphere sort of thing, there's like all of a sudden not everybody's like reach out and touch. You kind of need some things, you need answers on that you do need in person, and you have kind of all of these workarounds that are now online. I do think the physicality in my position is necessary, um, in communication and even just some of the process that run. I think it is necessary to have kind of in person for that. Um, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. Like there is going to be a big portion that was moved to home, and then kind of discovering actually, yeah, we don't need brick and mortar to do our daily processes. And then, so that's kind of a cut to overhead costs and kind of rediscovering a new dynamic.
Well, here's the this is already starting to happen in Alberta. This was starting to happen even before the pandemic, but during it, it exacerbated it. Even in Toronto right now, we can see it. When a lot of these leases for these corporate buildings go up next time, they will not be renewed. A lot of corporations are going to look at like, because again, not every job requires you to actually be in the building, and they're going to probably, this is an interesting opportunity to figure out what is and isn't considered quote unquote essential. I really hate using that word in this time, but that is one of the words. But what's essential to a brick and mortar place and what isn't? Because I do see office spaces still existing. But I remember when I was in Vancouver, because space was at such a premium, you would rent a room. You see these guys rent rooms for thousands of dollars. I could see offices shrink to the point where there might be just a floor of a building, or maybe a couple floors, or just a few floors of a building, and that's it, and that's all they're going to pay for, and the rest of it's going to be up for rent. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to homes in about 5 years when all these buildings are, the leases are up and they're done, and there's no need. And again, because this is business, as by its very nature, tends to try to be as efficient as possible in terms of process, because from a cost efficient point of view, right? Once change happens, so it's going to be interesting to see in about 3 to 5 years for most places, in a lot of cities, um, because city revenues like taxes come from a lot of these corporate buildings. Well, if corporations aren't renewing these buildings, where's the city going to get their taxes?
Yeah, well, that already happened in Calgary a few years back during the economic downturn.
Yeah. If,
The economic downturn.
yes.
um, and that's exactly what happened. A lot of these corporate buildings were looking to lease as alternative spaces. So some of them were converting into these kind of, well, ultra cool, I guess, condo spaces, right? With like this obscene amount of square footage, but it's still kind of like an office space, which now becomes kind of like not a warehouse space, but kind of, yeah, like almost like a street level loft or something like that. And they were
Studio.
looking for these
Studio space.
alternate spaces or these alternate ideas for leasing. And that happened a lot here in Calgary during the economic downturn. But yeah, and there wasn't like a big recovery like there
No.
before the pandemic. Like a lot of places did not move downtown, except for the government incentives that lured them into downtown and lured other businesses to downtown Calgary to be an alternative for a head office, because now instead of paying for office space to have head office in Toronto, they can get kind of more bang for their buck by having a head office plus government incentives in downtown Calgary.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me because I think it's still gonna, I think there's still gonna be an evolution of that process in the next few years. I mean, Calgary, I know it's like small businesses took a big hit on that one, the last time of the quote unquote economic downturn. I'm thinking of a particular bookstore like Owl's Nest, watching their space shrink literally in half simply because of the fact that the taxes increased. And I saw that some of my friends went through, like, I saw some of my friends, their housing taxes went up drastically. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when it catches up to the rest of the country. And I think that's one of the things happening that's going to happen in the next few years. On the flip side, I do like the idea. I do think coming out of this, people are going to value experiences a lot more. I don't know if a movie theater will ever come back, but I do think when concerts come back and events come back, I think there's going to be a lot more demand for that, at least initially, than there was maybe during the last little bit, because we realize what's missing. Like, there's a lot about what's going on today that, you know, we're missing some of these really cool experiences in life, and I think that's a big thing of what we pay for as consumers, but also what we offer as storytellers.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you were saying that you don't like that word essential, like I think that even the word essential is being redefined, because when you start looking at things like mental health, and just like you said, like just simple things like, you know, concerts and all of these sort of social outlets that are just no longer uh, well, they're not a part of, I guess, the essential dynamic, but then it kind of hits you on another level, like through mental health. And then you kind of have to question, you know, again, like what is the definition of essential? Because it is a bit of a gray area. Like, definitely, I maybe prefer the term, like when you're talking about frontline, um, a little bit more than essential. That kind of gives a clear um, description or definition of I guess maybe categorizing uh, uh, sort of. I'm still trying to avoid saying essential.
No, I get you. So here's the thing. I think categorizing has been a big mistake, to be very honest with you. Because even front line, as much as like that's a very war term. I'm on the front lines. I'm battling the good fight. I don't. This isn't a war. This is a moment in time is what this is to me. And what I feel like is like what I really recognize is, like, we're going to use the word essential, but we're going to use it in this term. I think everything that we were building was essential, right? And I think the small businesses that were lost, I think the all these things that people were building and making, and that was making life worthwhile to live. And it's not like, food, shelter. I mean, you can't. There's a point where it becomes an existence, and once you hit that point, okay, we can all exist. We can all survive a lot of things. But if all we're doing is surviving, and that's it, like all we're doing is surviving and we're just getting through the day, at some point, that is no longer enough. And at some point, you recognize that, life's about being lived, not be working for someone or making sure that things that existence keeps existing. It's about living. And um, I think when we look at the term surviving is one thing, but it's a very small basis to keep going, especially when all of us on just a big level are capable of so much more. And I get the and what it feels like. I think the majority of people that are out there is it's like there's a handcuffs on everybody. And for the time being, I think we've been putting up with it because this is an unknown. Hello to whoever's there. Um, uh,
My daughter.
Hi, Sholley's dollar. Nice to meet you. But I think what's gonna end up happening. I think where we're coming. I think personally that the lockdown concept's going to come to an end this year at some point. The reason why I think it's going to come to an end at some point, I think all of us on some level or another are going to be like, you know what, this isn't enough anymore, and we're all slowly. I've been out, quote unquote, on the front lines. Everybody's getting sick of this, and I think at some point either the government's going to throw in the towel, or at some point we're going to stop listening. And whether we're right or wrong, I think that's where we're at. That's where we're heading to. So I think the whole war mentality, the whole Orwellian concept of essential or front line, I don't think they do any of this stuff justice. And I think they're discovering that you need to live in some light, or it's just not worth doing.
Okay.
If you don't agree, I mean, you can definitely fire back at me on this. I mean, hey, I have my own opinions. You got yours.
Um, yeah, I think that, I mean, as I said, like, uh, even though definitions are kind of being kind of
Mm-hmm.
tweaked and whatever the case may be, I think to a certain degree, like, not even categorizing, but I guess for lack of a better word, let's say, sort of puts people's mindset as, instead of this invisible thing, like, where are we really? Like, it's kind of, some people just need the tangibility of, where am I on the scale? Where am I? Like, where do I fit? How broad is the scale? Like, when we're talking about, a lot of people are listening to how many cases there are, but not everybody's thinking about per capita. Like, everybody's trying to find where they fit in the scale, and that's where the derivative of, categorization, not so much by definition of putting in a box, but, more by definition of the full picture, the scheme of things, from more of an aerial perspective.
Well, it's also because when you categorize something, you make it a problem you can solve. There's something when you're able to quantify something, the more specific you are at quantifying stuff, the easier it is to identify. It's like, okay, this is a problem I can deal with. I can do something about this, which is a good. I mean, which is not a terrible space to be in, because if you feel like you can do something, you're going to go forward. You don't want people to feel helpless, right? And that's, I think that's part of it for sure. Um, I just I just remember, like I said at the very beginning, just watching everything kind of shudder and just watching kind of the hemorrhaging of a lot of things that just disappeared during this. That I, yeah, I don't. I think one of the things I just recognize on this is that people were making their livelihoods in a bunch of different ways, and then whatever that word means, like however you made that living, right? Something said this wasn't necessary over what was necessary. And I'm not, and looking at it now, almost a year into it, um, I feel like I feel like joy is necessary, and I think that's not one of the things I actually totally realize is I think what has been the thing is a lot of things, simplest things we took for granted, hugs, handshakes, greetings, contact. We're a tactile race, and we it's been a lot more limited in the last year, right? And I think what I realize is um, what I realize is there's very I think if there is no element of joy in life, and you gotta find, and again, you can still find it in this time. I'm not saying that, but I think the what I've come to the conclusion is I think joy is the probably one of the most essential things in a culture. If it's not there, then it's just a process, and if it's just a process, what are we doing? It's my thought anyway. And if you just
Yeah.
right, it's just that's just
Well, it all depends on where you fall in perspective of how you identify joy. Like some people do identify joy of going to work every single day and
absolutely,
being in that office, and that's what brings them joy, like all the challenges that comes with that, from when they leave the house to when they return at night, and then already planning the next day. That's what brings some people joy. Like,
absolutely. Some people
it really depends
absolutely.
on where you fall, I guess, on the scale of that as well, by definition, maybe.
Hmm. So how about you? Where do you fall? What do you think? Like what? Actually, we'll throw it this way because what have you enjoyed the most about this time? Because there are good things about this, absolutely, and I'll tell you mine, and if you tell me yours. So
I guess for me, it's pretty simple. It hasn't really much changed from beforehand. I do believe in just human contact, not so much just physicality, but kind of redirecting to uh, kind of getting to know your neighbors. But these people aren't even your neighbors, they're supposed to be your friends, but then you have to reevaluate how well do you actually really know somebody. And then this whole time frame has kind of given a time to not even evaluate that, but do something about it. um, and a lot of it reminds me of being young, like when there wasn't, we had rotary dial, like you called somebody and you were going over to their house, and it was going to take you 15 minutes to walk there. So you're watching the clock on both ends. And by the clock, I mean either the analog on your wrist or from the time you leave, kind of mentally judging the time that it's going to take you to walk to get to your friend's house. Like just very basic things like that, and sort of things that kids enjoy that we've just been so removed from. We've had to, not just the creatives, but everybody has had to get creative into um, what their day looks like, what their day looks like from start to finish. And I'm not just talking about work, but it almost feels like it almost feels like on the day-to-day basis there is a little bit more life in life
mhm.
um, over this time, because it's not only do you actually can relate to not taking things for granted and what that actually means. People are actually listening a little bit more to words, and not just the cliche of having to say something in response, but more about the what it means. Like there's like an aha moment of what it means to really connect an idea with a real process, and that's kind of happening every single day. And it's just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like in movies after something terrible, there's that weird kind of dawning where it's kind of that music that, you know, it's a new day kind of thing. And there's a lot more of that. There's a lot more of families doing things outdoors, and together, and simple things where, you know, you're moving over on the sidewalk because there's a family of four coming towards you, where before it was just you'd see kids playing or adults in their cars or whatever, you know. And now it's just like these whole families of, I guess maybe by design, maybe getting out of the house, but still spending that time together, and kind of a little bit more sharing, a little bit more, a little less taking things for granted. Yeah, I think that is kind of one of those kind of moments in time where usually it takes almost like on an individual basis, I guess, it takes kind of tragedy to put things into perspective. But right now, it's almost like everybody in unison are putting things into perspective every single day.
So for me, it's been about two things. I'm in Windsor. My family's here. So my
Mhm.
grandmother and her boyfriend, right? And I think that's awesome that she's doing that right now. She's 80 years old. She schooled me in darts. The guy say something, never play darts with my grandmother. She'll take you to the cleaners. She hits like these double bullseyes every three throws. It's like it's scary how good she is at darts. It's like I got worked. I got totally worked. And then I'm with my dad. My dad's here too, and I'm enjoying this time because I know when at some point this year I get the feeling I'm not going to be in the city anymore. I get the feeling I don't know where I'm going to go next, but I kind of get the feeling that at some point I'm going to get pulled in another direction. And when I do, I'm going to try. The best advice I got was from my sister, who was in Toronto, is you know what, you have a really cool opportunity here to see family while you're here. Take advantage of it because the next time you may not, when you go, it might be a long time before you get this kind of opportunity again. And I take that very seriously. The only thing that has sucked for me is my grandmother's in Detroit, and I haven't seen her, and I can't. Well, I can. You can still travel, but the consequence would have been for a while there devastating. But before I do leave here, I am going to see her. I've kind of made that promise to myself because, again, she's 83 years old. If I do not take this opportunity now, I might not get another chance. But I'm going to wait towards the end of my time here to do it because it's like um, I want to see her, and I think it's worth that seeing. Um, before whatever happens next, I walk away. I just but I've had this chance to see my family. I draw. Like I don't know if you've seen anything online there, but I've actually been drawing stuff. I discovered the secret to the Lego mustache is very much like a porn stash. I figured that out when I actually drew a Lego figure. Terrible thing, but it's true. But I've let so for me the joys I've had this year has been about completely about discovery, reconnecting with my family and discovery. Well, I'd love to have gone on a date, but that's kind of hard. That's kind of an interesting spot right now. It's kind of hard to introduce yourself to people at this moment, but besides that, I really can't complain. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is what it is. I feel like again, you chase joy however you chase joy. For me, it's been about discovery. Um, I never thought, and I've sold illustrated pieces. I've never thought I'd actually do that. It's like I sold pictures, sweet, right? So it's going to open the door for me to chase other goals I have. Hopefully by the end of this year. So, um, any writing? Been writing at all?
Um, no, I haven't been.
Okay.
To be honest, I really haven't been. I've been reading a little bit of what the local poets have been putting out, like just Tyler Perry and um, uh, just let a book recently. Oh, I haven't picked up uh, Joshua Whitehead's book yet, but that is my next purchase. Like I have him on Instagram, and I don't know why, but I'm very excited about
Good.
this book. Um, yeah, and really just a lot of the local poets that have sort of been not just supportive, but I'm really interested in their work. So it's kind of been nice that there's that tangibility of, even though we're not going to open mics or anything like that, that I can actually just go to Shelf Life Books and grab their book. I absolutely love that. And then I can actually just message them and ask them questions about,
Yes.
that's not a privilege that you have with an author. It's just to actually have all of these poets and writers here in Calgary that you can literally reach out and touch. I think that's pretty amazing. Yeah, so I'm
I
kind of
I used to love the
sorry.
fact that I used to love the fact that when I was there, when I lived there, that I could literally go and call a friend who's writing some really cool stuff. Hey, you want to go for a coffee? Just have some good time, and just meet, chill, relax, have a good time,
Yeah,
and you forget sometimes, like, these guys are doing incredible things right under your nose,
yeah,
right, all the time, and you just don't. It's a weird thing because it's like you see the human being. I think the biggest thing I miss about Calgary, um, like yesterday, it dawned on me when I was interviewing Miranda yesterday. You know, I know Miranda the human being, and I love Miranda the human being, right? But at the same time, Miranda the poet, Miranda the performer, is awesome and does amazing stuff under everybody's nose. Not even under everybody's nose. She just always does it. And it's like, wow. And I get to talk to this person all the time. That's cool. That is always just a really cool privilege. And if I were to say everything I missed in Calgary, that I miss is one of the two or three biggest things I miss about the city is that.
yeah, yeah. It's it is a pretty good venue here.
Yeah, it is.
Of yeah, and the accessibility to the artists is, and they welcome it. So it's just, can I prick your brain? Of course. Like there's just, that's all it is. And then
Mhm.
also seeing the young poets that are coming up, like, are just absolutely amazing. Yeah, and there's Can You Hear Me Now, with Tyler Perry and John Williamson, that host this with these high school students at Shelf Life Books, and they still have features of local poets coming out to read for these kids. And then again, like they just go on, but even just their level of creativity is just astounding. It's just, it's like it wows me. And then a couple of students that were at that oh, was it Birchchurch? I think out here in Airdrie. Um, there was an event at APL at the Airdrie Public Library, and that they were having this open mic. Um, but kids had come from Calgary, and then the Airdrie kids, because there was the guest, the guests that were reading that night from Calgary had kind of talked about Can You Hear Me Now? And then one of the teachers actually organized an evening to bring the kids out to Shelf Life Books from Airdrie. And now there's kind of that interconnection where the kids here will go to the city, and then they organized for the short time that it was that we were not on lockdown. There was some of these kids from these schools that I knew from APL and some of the contests that they had there, that they organized their events at Good Earth and just had all of these like kids read, and a lot of them I'd already met already, whether I was reading at their school or at the library. And he added me to Instagram, and yeah, it's absolutely great to see that it's continuing. It's not just kind of this generational demographic. It's kind of evolving and growing and continuing through those kind of programs.
Well, I think the interesting thing about this, the other flip side is, I think the arts became more valuable, and because I think we all recognized just how much we needed them just for escape, and just drive. But also, I think the other really cool thing too is thing about kids. Thing I love about kids, they don't know all the rules, and that's probably the best thing because they try different things and do different things. You never we teach ourselves as we do art about what works and what doesn't. Sometimes we have to unlearn stuff because then you'll see someone like that come out and take what you thought was such a you can't do this and be like, no, you can do this. Why didn't I think of that? That's awesome. Back to the drawing board. I know nothing, and that's and that's a good thing though. I like you need different voices create more sophisticated stories because they take what has come before and they add other levels to it that weren't there, and that's always an incredible thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's actually interesting that you touch upon that, because I think that in our conversation before, when I said, well, I never studied writing or anything like that. That's the same thing as these kids. Like I didn't know the rules, so I don't work within them because I don't know what they are. It's like, and I've always said, like, this is just kind of it's not what keeps me up at night. It's because I'm up, I'm writing. It's
Yeah.
the other way around. It's so there are no rules like
No.
for me putting my thoughts down to paper. So I know that in our prior conversation you were kind of picking up from that or drawing from that, um, that it was a lack of confidence. That's not what it was at all. What it was just that, like, just like you said about these kids, like, I don't know what the rules are. So I don't work within them. So
I
that's
understand.
why I say that I'm not like a structured, I never went to school for writing or anything like that. It was just this sort of happenstance thing that yes, I've always written, but sort of like the performance side of it or the reading is what's been new over the last couple of years.
It wasn't the reason I picked on the confidence thing. It was the fact that you said maybe you didn't quite say it this way, but I'm going to just go based on my recollection on this. You like saving on it, like the spot isn't like you feel like you're sitting on a spot that belongs to somebody else or something to that. It was something like that you said. I'm not sure if it was. There was something you said. There was something you said that you weren't right or you weren't this. There was something I can't remember exactly what you said there, but that's what did it. The fact that you operate under your own rules is. Have you seen my writing? Have you actually seen my writing? I make up my own rules as I go myself. I try different things. I'm an experimenter. I play with different things, and I don't. We're I feel the reason I picked up on that is I just never let that. I never really thought about it. I just did shit and didn't worry about the results to result. I recognize the fact that something. Everybody brings their voice into a story, and learning. And just because you may or may not have any formal, I don't really have any formal training either. All I've done is practice with what I know works for me. And as I've gotten better at it, um, what I recognize actually, what I truly realized is the rules don't matter. It's more along the fact is how true are you to the voice you're trying to convey, the message that really matters to you. How true are you to laying that out? If you're as true as you know how to be, or as clear about that as you possibly can be, then you're doing it. It doesn't like the rules don't really matter. There's always things you can polish, but you're still telling the story. And really that's all that really matters. And the fact that you can tell it your way makes you no more or it makes you no less a writer than anybody else. Right? That knew the rules. Who cares? Rules most anybody I know that's ever written just like, I just made stuff and things happened. I think honestly, sometimes it's that simple.
Sure.
Sure, you go with that. You go with that.
I didn't know if you're bouncing the ball to my court or if that was just end of statement.
Well, it's always a balance. This is like I said. This is a conversation, right? And I say my opinion. I'm listening to you, and we're just going back and forth. And I'm just having fun. That's all I want to do. That's all we're doing here. I hope that's all we're doing here anyway. Not secretly like judging me and just like I'm gonna just put him in this. No, I'm teasing.
Yeah, no, I just yeah, I like balance. So, but it's funny because people seem to think that balance means 50-50. But balance could mean a lot of different things. It could be 70-30. It could be 20-20-30-20. Like it's just yeah, I just like balance and kind of working to figure out not even to figure it out, but just kind of changing the equation daily or as evolution happens. And I don't mean evolution outside of me, I mean evolution with myself. And that's like even just, you know, being free to change my mind or my perspective or my position or anything like that, like without being hardwired into one idea sort of thing. But yeah, so I think that that's another thing during COVID that a lot of people are starting to work through is what balance even means to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like what does balance look like to them? Like, you know, with for a lot of people that work the corporate now, they're appreciating their family life. They may be appreciating the fact that they are at a home office and that there's no commute. So the time that they used to use for commute, they're just actually leaving the home office door at home and spending time with their family. Like it's just yeah, there's so many different dynamics to this that I think, or I like to believe that in on one hand, one small hand, because there's also the other side, but there is like a portion of it that kind of reminds us about basic humanity, like just um, what it means to live, opposed to like what you're saying, to just surviving, or, you know, what it actually means to live in between the time from nine after, sorry, 9 to 5, like what it means to live within that space from 5 until the next 9, sort of thing. But yeah.
Okay, so lots to unpack. So here's my take on balance. I play card games. I play collectible card games. I played them ever since I was a kid. There has never been a game environment I've ever played that has been a perfect 50-50 balance. That's on purpose. There is always usually somewhere in the format a best deck of some kind, some way that everybody could play to win. There were decks that could beat that deck, but the numbers were never 50-50. 50-50 is a coin toss. I don't know about you, but after like one or two coin tosses, right? I don't want to do a coin toss anymore because it's only going to be one or two results. 50-50 is very that's what a balance is. So it's like heads or tails. Balance is, as you say, I actually agree with you, is it's a variety of different things based on partially who you are in that moment and also partially who are you trying to grow into. I mean, we all have, I do tend to think on some level we all have a direction we all kind of want to go to, and depending on what that direction is for people, sometimes some people it could be just simply as I just want to enjoy today. That's fine. That's a very simple direction. Other people, it's like me. It's like, okay, so I'm gonna figure out my master plan to just go and see and do everything that matters to me because I just like that's because for me I recognize for me it's about the fact that I realize that time keeps moving and life keeps on going and I want to keep living. And what is living for me? Going back to what you said at the very end there. Um, but balance for everybody is a little it everybody looks for different things and has different goals. And it's never a fully perfect 50-50. Sometimes it may not even be like two sides. It could be something like, 60, 20, 10, 5, like whatever that equate because everybody's got their own like balance can be a lot of different things depending on the person. I actually very much agree with you there. Um live yeah, but what is living is a very, very interesting question. And I think I'm very curious, like I said, as I do think, like I said, I personally, whatever the lockdowns end or not, there's going to come a day when this year or not, there's going to come a day when they do. And when they're done and when they're finished, I think the question of going through all this, I think as a whole, we're going to become something far more resilient. Um, I also think on the flip side as well, we're going to like the art that's going to come out of this in the years to come. I think is going to be about that question of what life is worth living. Because again, when you have so many things taken from you, it gives you something too. And I think again, as you say, we're coming to a point where we're looking at the whole picture very differently now, and that's inevitably, I think, a good thing. But we'll see. You know.
Yeah. Um, I think after we come out of it, yes, things will change for a while. But I also think that people revert and digress. Like,
Well,
I think it'll have its moments, but I do not think the vast majority will be forever changed. I do not.
no. 9/11 when it happened, the first year it happened, everybody was. It's actually, um, I think that's the other reason why the frontline essential thing bothers me. I just remember the firefighters and policemen and stuff back in the day, and it's almost like history repeating itself when that happens. Like praise, like it's a similar thing. Not really important, other than say that like, I remember that was a big thing about they were the front lines, they were the heroes. I remember like people were up in arms about possible terrorist attacks in the United States for about a year or two, and then after a year or two, we it's our blessing and our curse. We forget the the once it fully registers what happens. Part of our recovery process is that we forget.
I
And it's
like
not
childbirth.
hmm?
I said
Sorry.
like childbirth.
Yeah, we forget. Absolutely. I wouldn't know. Like I can't make a comment on that one because I don't really know. I imagine it looks painful, but
No, that's the exact premises
yeah,
that you don't remember it. You just don't remember it, and that's why people have more than one child.
yeah. And it's not always a bad thing, right? It's not always a bad thing. There's good and bad with it. The good with it is you get that opportunity to bounce back. I think I think last year it was really really tight. This year is still going to be tightish. Next year it's going to loosen up more, and then the year after it's going to loosen up more, and the year after it's going to loosen up more because, as you so say, people forget. That's both a good and bad thing. History tends to repeat itself, and that's the downside. The upside, though, is it lets people live and life goes on, and you're free to make sometimes the same. Sometimes you're insane and you make the same mistakes again. Sometimes, but sometimes it also lets you open up. Okay, you got to let me in on the joke.
Hi.
Hi.
Bye.
Bye.
Daughter number 2.
Hi, daughter number 2. Hi, daughter number 2. I don't know your name, but hi.
Yeah, Kaylee and Haley.
Kaylee and Haley. Okay.
Yeah. Easy.
Okay.
Easy.
Nice. Nice. But yeah, I mean, that's the good thing, right? So it's good and bad. And it's the human condition, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's by design. By design to survive trauma, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I still like most traumatic moments in my life, they don't. I still have like an echo of that pain,
Mm-hmm.
but it's an echo. I've made my peace with my I've made my peace with most of my inner demons, so it's kind of like I will never forget what certain moments in my life felt like in that moment, but they don't feel like they did in that moment, and I'm well aware of that too, and that's I think honestly overall a blessing because if I could feel everything exactly the same way, I don't think I could move on. And the fact that I can take a shot, kind of go shake it off, and get the ability at some point to shake it off, that your body forgets, well, somewhat forgets everything you did with it. There are some things I did. It's like younger days, where it's like you were stupid. It's like yes, I was. It's okay, right? But even in that, it doesn't feel the exact in that moment, right? It didn't feel like it does now. And I think, and that's a very, I think honestly, it's more good than bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's kind of the purpose of coming out on the other end. I think that in those sort of moments, you kind of learn and grow.
Hopefully. Hopefully. That's the part that's interesting with everybody. We all learn and grow in different ways. But then,
Mm.
but then, if we didn't, um, you and I look at the world very differently. But that's a good thing because I certainly would be very depressed if I knew absolutely everything about the world. And I think everybody would be because I am such a tiny, insignificant part of it in the grand scheme of things, and I'm good with that. I'm actually okay being small, and as I get older, I realize I'm even smaller than I imagined. But I think that's awesome because that means the world is even bigger than I imagined, and there's more wonders and magic and joy to see, hear, touch, taste, experience while I'm here. And I know that when I'm gone, there's going to be a ton of things I didn't get to do, but that's okay too. Not everything here is for me. So that's, I think, an amazing thing.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. I think that we grow more or most um, in the spaces that we're uncomfortable in.
Let's relate. I have 8 rules of success, and that's my eighth rule: stay uncomfortable. And in fact, like this freelancing thing I did this year. It expires March 21st, 2021. Doesn't mean I stop freelancing. It just means I start pursuing seriously some other avenues as well. I go into the unknown and I try different things and I learn and I set myself a deadline because it keeps me uncomfortable. And if I go past that deadline, I mean, it may not be a perfect deadline. Maybe it's March 24th. Maybe it's April 1st. Maybe it's March 15th. It's not exactly like there is definitely room. There's room both ways. But the thing is, I learned a long time ago that I've learned and discovered the most things about myself when I'm in the most uncertain of points, the most uncomfortable of points, when I don't know what's going to happen next. Because all that's there is me. And that's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, the unknown keeps it interesting.
Always. Always. I get the feeling that we've had a pretty decent interview here. What do you think, Miss Sholley?
That we, sorry?
That we have a pretty decent interview here. What do you think, Miss
We have
Sholley?
pretty
Yeah,
decent
pretty
interview
decent.
and time.
Yeah. But before we go, before we wrap this up, you like are there any like obviously I'm not sure if you have any events or anything planned, but do you have anything coming up that you're doing and that's awesome, or do you got any goals you'd like to like announce to the world in some form or fashion? If not, that's cool. But I mean, I just figured we should do this here before we wrap up.
I don't have anything coming up. But what was interesting was that just before, literally, I think the day that lockdown started back in March, um, myself and three other poets, Josephine, Leroux, Monty Brer, and oh, I don't know what's happening to my mind right now. Um, a few of us poets were able to get together online through Single Onion um, for an event that we were supposed to have in March on March 18th, lockdown day. What was interesting about that was that there was like initially the event date didn't work because it was going to be in person for one of the poets that I really wanted to see. And because it was online, everybody can be there from Vancouver and Calgary and just all over. So that was kind of interesting, because we didn't know, being the first day of lockdown, we didn't really know when it was going to happen, how it was going to happen, if it was going to happen. So when it finally happened on December, I think it was December 18th, it was interesting to see how it came together. And it was a lot of the times, even when I'm involved and I'll be reading, I just get more excited about um, the other poets who are going to be reading. And it's just kind of, oh, if I didn't have to read, I would really just love to listen. So that was great. There's a lot of sort of online communities that get together, but this one was just something that, well, it was almost a year in the making, in the way that it came, like the way that it actually, I guess, happened was actually really good. We actually ended up with 5 poets instead of the original 4. Um, like I said, because now Moni was able to be there, even though she's in Vancouver. And the last time she was actually traveling. So yeah, it was, I really liked, well, I was astonished to be even involved on that guest list. But it was just, yeah, it was a really, really, really good night. The way that it evolved and came together. But yeah, I know that Kirk has still been having his Drunken Poet Societies on Monday, but took a break this month. And he's not really sure when he's going to be hosting those again. But a few things that have been happening throughout the pandemic on the social side have been good, because people can sort of tap in and tap out as they need, or you can just go and listen, or yeah, so that's kind of been great. It's a different platform, obviously. It is for everyone. It's a little bit redundant to even say so. But even the feeling of reading something is very different when there is no distraction, and then all you have is your words. It's just a I don't know. I don't know about anybody else listening, but I do know, being a listener, it's just so receptive. Yeah. But as far as coming up, no, I don't have anything.
Okay. Silence is quite profound, actually, especially when you are listening. I I interview people, right? So one of the things I always listen to is what's said and what isn't said, and there's a lot of story in the silences sometimes, and I think it's always really, really, really fascinating. We all tell stories whether we realize it or not, and I've learned that, and it's always in sometimes the silence speaks the biggest volumes, especially when you're reading in front of a crowd. So good and bad. So on that note, okay, so do you have, I guess the last question, then I'll wrap this up. Do you have any writing goals this year? Is there anything you'd like to accomplish?
Writing goals. I don't really. As I said, I kind of write very differently than a lot of people, and the same as a lot, but um I'm not by design somebody that does um practice writing. What happens to me more is I'll be doing something else and I have to write something down, because whatever's going on in my head at that moment, it's demanding attention enough to distract me from whatever I'm doing. that I have to put it on paper in order for it to be gone for that moment. And then maybe I revisit it, add to it, or just give space to whatever was happening in my head at that time, give attention to whatever was happening in my head at that time. Um, and then I usually move away from it and revisit it later. But I have never been one that has the ability, like a lot of people do, to just sit and give space to writing in the format of wanting to create something very specific.
You completely pants your way through, like whatever that voice says, you're like the conduit to it. It comes out.
That's exactly it.
You're the conduit, and then when it's done, you're like, well, now what do I do with it? Right? Is that, or do you know sometimes what you're doing with it?
No, that is what the purpose is. To get it out and down. That's just it. That is the purpose for me. That it's there. There's no intent for to serve any other purpose. If it ends up to be something that I want to read, I'll read it. But if it ends to be something that I might just share with my mom,
Nothing wrong with that.
or pardon me?
There's nothing wrong with that.
Then that's all it is. Or it even could be, the purpose of it could be a conversation that I need to have with somebody else that is going through something, and I need to remember to tell them something specific that happens to be this or whatever. So yeah, I I think that's a little bit more of just how I write, why I write. But outside of that, of there being a purpose to it, I don't think there is directly. I think that is the purpose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I want to publish books, kind of what I want to do. Not everybody has that same, necessarily has that same need to do that. That's okay.
Yeah, and I find that a lot of times that either through excitement or whatever, or somebody being inspired by something you have written or read, they're always looking or asking, what's next, or for what's coming more, or whatever, because they're excited about it. But it's kind of, it reminds me of like if you're in a relationship for a long time, and then it's kind of like to the point where, well, what's happening next? Are you going to get married? Are you going to, then you get married? Are you going to have kids? And then you have kids. Are you going to, it's just always what's next. But I'm content in the what is.
And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's as long as you're happy with what you're doing. Really, what can anyone say, right? It's about, you write well. You write well. I'm glad you share when you do. And I think a lot. No, I'm just being real here. I'm glad you share when you do. Um, if you want to do it more, I'd encourage it. If you don't, that's equally fine too. It's about what you ultimately. It's about what you want, right? And for you, if it just getting it out, sharing it to whoever you feel needs to hear it, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I just yeah. I like to listen. I love hearing other voices. I love hearing and visually seeing these pieces of personalities that aren't always attainable in just everyday pleasantries, you know?
No, that's why I do what I do. I love hearing other people's stories. All right, yeah, so that's kind of it's. I learn from everybody. So on that note, whatever you choose to do, I wish you the best. Seriously, I
But
don't. No, there's no. I I've come like the last thing I've learned about people. I came to this conclusion about 4 years ago, and when I came to this conclusion, actually 3 years ago, when I came to this conclusion, it was easier for me to actually just let any hostility towards pretty much anybody go. People do what they want to do, and that's I mean, no matter what the situation is. And once I realized that, it was like, sweet. Um, and I was actually able to use that to actually be more forgiving with people than not. Because now I understood it. I understood.
Mhm.
I understood certain things better. And once I figured that out, um, It's easier to walk away, and it was also easier. But it was also just easier to accept because now again, going back to something I said, we all see the world a little bit differently, and and then I recognize, and that's when I was able to actually make peace with the fact that it's not about me. That actually is a very liberating thing. So
Mhm.
I ultimately, when you write, like whatever you write, whatever you say, it's about what you want, and whatever you want, I hope you get it. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah. All right. But if people do want to find you, see some of the stuff that is out there, how would they do that?
Nothing out there.
I've heard you, and people have heard and seen some stuff, but I mean, it may not be officially published anywhere. But
No.
you have
Um,
performed stuff though, and you have done other
I
things.
have with Wolf, um, uh, with Adrian, Wolf Voices, Single Onion, Wakefield's Pitbull Poetry, a lot of just local venues that are currently no longer or on hold.
They're currently on
Um,
hold for the time being. Yes.
Currently on hold. But yeah, I, I, I do. I like the local venues are amazing. The community here is just amazing at any level. And like I said, you can reach out and touch anybody, like, like Miranda, Wakefield, just like Mel V. Like there's just so many.
Melvie is she's intense, but she's incredibly sweet, whether she wants to admit that or not. Um, I've talked to her. She is surprisingly. I remember when I met her. I met her at Sweet and Sultry Summer. She was doing a performance for MJ and Colette. She's in this like really stunning dress. First time I met her, and I was interviewing her in like this. We ended up calling it the murder room because you look around, there's like this ice cream thing, like thing or stores ice cream that's empty. It's like a little like an abandoned little thing in the Eau Claire Mall that no one's into. And I think it was Mel. It wasn't Mel. Lisa Palmer coined this room the murder room. And you looked around, and it's like, yeah, someone could get would be, this is the kind of room someone would get murdered in, and that's where I met Mel. And no, she is as much as tough as she is, and she's like mentally very, she's very strong, but she's also very sweet. I know she probably would hate hearing that together, but there is definitely a sweetheart in there, and I really she's interesting. I really enjoyed meeting her. So
Yeah, yeah. there's a lot of interesting people here.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just like to, just because I can, reach out, touch that, and absorb it. Like, really just being so gracious to have the ability to have these people literally at an arm's length. It's great.
Mm-hmm. World's a small world, and it's the best way it should be. So, do you want people to be able to contact you? I'm going to ask this question right now because if so, where? If not, we'll officially wrap the show up. So with this, and we'll call.
I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. With a name like Sholley, I'm very easy to find.
Right. So this is Sholley Powell, great writer, interesting person. Love chatting with her. Thank you for coming on my show, and thank you for putting up with this insanely strange whatever the hell happened here.
Honestly, it's been that kind of day from start to finish. Nothing was working when I got into work today, and then our corporate Wi-Fi was off, and then even after that, stuff that I had posted had somehow disappeared. And it was happening. A few people had that kind of day. So there's some kind of energy in this day that is messing with technology.
Yeah, well, it was one of those things. Like I learned something because it's again it made me scramble and I did something different. So if you guys did leave comments, I really do apologize because it's just one of those situations where circumstances force a really drastic solution, and I'd say, but you did get the stream tonight, so guys, thank you. Sholley is awesome. I love chatting with her. I met her way back in the day at a poetry writing workshop, and it was great. And I always thought she was
12.
what? Yes, Loft 12. Loft 112, yes. And that's a story for another day. The first time I actually was in that room. The pictures on the wall definitely inspired writing because you didn't want to look up ever. But I digress for another day. I want to thank everybody for listening, everybody for watching. If you want to support this stream, but the follow button, twitch.tv/JustJoshingPodcast. My YouTube channel is Joshua Pentoloresco. I have books you can definitely buy. I have a Patreon you can definitely subscribe to. Stay inspired, keep shining in the dark, and I'll see you guys tomorrow with not one, but 2 streams.
Ooh.
Yeah.